Is the audio okay? I mean, it's the quality of the audio. Can you hear?
Do you hear us? Because we have this. We don't know if it works well. So we want to be simple and gave a taste of this practice experientially. And so now we will just start with a brief introduction, just to frame it. So insight dialogue is a insight meditation, relational insight meditation, relational Vipassana, as they say. And maybe most of you already know something about its history. We are not going into that, but it was started around after 1995. So it's a young practice built on a millenary tradition of insight meditation. So it's a interpersonal meditation practice, which is built on solitary individual meditation. Can't do without. But the aim is to introduce in meditation the complexity of being with others. Let's say that when we are absorbed in individual meditation, when we cultivate our mind in that way, that is a necessary step. But something is left out. Something that belongs to life is left out. And also, if we want to address suffering, it comes out that much of human suffering is caused by relationship with others. And so this is one of the reasons that Gregory Kramer had this vision to enlarge the scope of meditation. Because let's say it could seem that meditation becomes a niche, an ecological niche where you stay, and then you go into life. And where are the meditative qualities that you develop in silent meditation? They don't go automatically into life. So this practice aims at cultivating a way of bringing the meditative qualities of the mind and the aspiration to liberation in the whole life, as it said, in the 24 hours life. Also because if you are just meditating silently, individually, a lot of challenges and a lot of occasions to develop insight are left out. And the relational is a realm, as they say, that deserves a lot of attention. Also, the fact that as human beings, we are, as they say, inherently relational, which means that our body-mind is built to be in relation, to be connected to others than ourselves. So a meditative practice that doesn't take into account this enormous part of our humanity is inevitably limited, maybe. And when I say relational, it hasn't to do with good relation, bad relation, enjoying communication, communicating better with people. It's really a liberation practice. It's really built on a shared possibility to cultivate insight and wisdom together in the middle of the suffering. and sometimes its most value is when there is a bad relation going on. So you can penetrate attachment, reactivity, aversion in the moment. And this is really liberating. And this practice brings out a very direct way to let's say, untie these knots that are behind our relational suffering and confusion in the sense of ignorance, not knowing reality as it is. So through the relational practice, it is possible to cultivate mindfulness and tranquility, as well as in the individual mindfulness. And these are qualities that are fundamental in allowing us to apprehend the nature of experience, moment by moment, while experience is happening, while we are challenged by another, ourselves in relation. It's important to say that it's not aimed to a better communication. It's not a communication skill. This is very important because it would be reducing. It's a liberation practice. An insight dialogue is built of individual silent practice and these dialogues, meditative dialogues, that have contemplation. The topics we are invited to speak about are called contemplations, and they are, let's say, contemporary themes that are really closely linked to the wisdom tradition. So it's a way to bring in through the day-to-day life aspects that we are living now, let's say in this historical time, with a direct connection with the wisdom tradition, the way the contemplative wisdom tradition express themselves in our normal life. But it's not only speaking about something, because we speak in a meditative stance, which means we speak embodied. This is an embodied practice. It's not something you understand just with your mind or cognitively or with your intellect or with the beauty of ideas. It has to be, it has to involve the entire body, mind, heart, mind, body. It has to be brought into life in everyday experience. And in order to help, to support this embodied, mindful, meditating together, we practice helped by guidelines, meditative instructions. And these meditative instructions are very practical, direct, experiential ways to orient our attention, to cultivate the mind. So it's a real practice. You need to practice it. And these guidelines come into invite into the relationship the factors of awakening, the meditative qualities of the mind. You can practice in dyads or in triads. I mean, the format can change. It depends on the group, on the moment, on the experience. And just to end, these dialogues are always surrounded by silence. So whenever we speak, it comes from silence, goes back to silence.
Sì, dovrò riprendere alcune cose che hai detto perché sei già entrata nelle tre basi.
Okay.
So in order to frame and deepen a little what Antonella has already said, a common way to try to make a synthetic overall vision of Inside Dialogue is speaking about the three bases of Inside Dialogue, three dimensions that are together while practicing, which make, by the way, Inside Dialogue a rather complex practice. So at the beginning, you can expect to be a bit confused about what to do exactly, because there are more things in a way that practitioners are doing at the same time. So one base of Inside Dialogue is the relationality. So the very fact that we are practicing in actual relational contact with another. I mean, also in individual meditation, most of the visitors that comes to us have to do with other person, other relationship. But that's, in a way, it's retrospective. The specificity of the relational practice is that you are meditating with another human being, another awareness, into the moment-to-moment actual relational contact. And this is the whole dimension in which you can discover, see in the moment, also aspect of the selfing that are maybe so clearly visible only in the actual relationship. And there is also the energy that comes from being in a relational contact. Because each time we are in contact with someone else, if one starts to notice, there is a lot of energy arising, and this energy can be put in service of the practice. And the other dimension is that this is a meditation practice. So there are the instruction or guidelines, which, as all the meditative instruction in any mindfulness meditation or inside meditation tradition, are basically a way that tell people how to deploy their attention, how and what to pay attention in the complexity of the arising experience. So there are these instructions that, as always, all the meditation instruction, has to be experienced, and there are layers and layers that one start to know by practicing. So in this respect, please don't come to some conclusion about the instruction in the brief experiential practice that we are going to propose you, because there are many layers that one start to discover while practicing. And then there is the wisdom dimension, the Dhamma, because this contemplation, first, they are based literally, at least speaking of Inside Dialogue, in the Buddha Dhamma. So this contemplation, at least their roots, come from the teachings, and especially the so-called early Buddhist teachings. So the first strata that we can today reconnect with of the Buddhist traditions. So basically the sutta is transmitted by the Pali Canon, and more recently by all the movement of so-called early Buddhist studies. But they are not proposed only as quotation, usually not, sometimes. But the point is to bring the theme of contemplation that are already present in this wisdom tradition into our own experience. So a characteristic of the contemplation themes are, on the one side, they are endless, because they concern, this contemplation concern aspect of our life that are always present in our life, one way or another. So the possibility of contemplation is endless, literally, because each time one comes back to this contemplation can discover something different. On the other side, we can call this theme universal, in the sense that there is no human being that can say, I'm not concerned with this theme, this existential theme. Then the personality, the personal history, the stage in life can change the way we react to this aspect of these themes. But it's really difficult to imagine a human being that can say, no, this is not something that concerns me. So there are universal aspects we meet as human beings in our life experience. Only when all these three dimensions are present, we can say, only when these three dimensions are present. No, sorry. Yes, so the being in actual relationship, this dimension, practicing this in a meditative state of mind invited by the instruction. And because when we make use of language, we have to talk about something. And so talking about this so-called contemplation, universal human, or when all these three conditions are present, we can say there is inside dialogue. If only one or two of these conditions are present, there is no inside dialogue, and we can find in a domain which is more usual of other disciplines. For example, it's important not to confuse inside dialogue with some sort of psychotherapy. This can be a typical misunderstanding. Because in psychotherapy, you are not in dialogue, or you're not talking or listening while practicing meditative contemplation. You can bring your quality of presence, and in fact, inside dialogue can be, in a way, a good way to develop meditative quality of the mind that then one can bring in any relationship, included a therapeutic relationship, if she's a psychotherapist. But usually this is not what's happening in psychotherapy. And okay, there is a, maybe I can share. No, but I think because we are a bit coming short of time, you can just imagine a Venn diagram in which all these three dimensions are overlapping, and only in the place where all the three dimensions are overlapping, we can say there is the practice of inside dialogue.
And we can end this part with a quotation from the suttas that I'm going to read you. It comes from Anguttara Nikaya.
One thing, maybe it's important. Sorry, I was before this. We, in a way, have now focused on inside dialogue as a way to deepen our penetrative understanding, comprehension, insight in what is creating hindrances in our relationship. But there is also another side, say a more meditative, liberative side, in which inside dialogue as a meditative practice is also, because of this energy, in some respect, might be able to develop some of the so-called awakening factors. The awakening factor it's a map from the Buddhist tradition. For example, concentration, even more intensively than individual meditation. So there is also this, say, strict meditative side of developing, in the sense of developing meditative qualities.
So I go back to the quotation, and it's, that's the purpose of discussion. That's the purpose of counsel. That's the purpose of drawing near. That's the purpose of lending ear. It's the liberation of the mind through no clinging. And while one is in dialogue, the starting point is seeing the clinging directly as it's happening, not thinking about the clinging, not remembering the clinging, it's happening there. And so you can really be challenged face to face, but you can cultivate wisdom at the same time. Of course, in inside dialogue, you always choose what to say. You are never obliged to speak something that you don't feel like speaking. There is a whole frame of guidelines, let's say, that we are not going to introduce now because it would eat up all the time. So it's, I mean, you don't have to think of this about a very unsafe practice, in the sense that you are cultivating kindness together also.
And one of the guidelines, and maybe we can already anticipate it before going in the more experiential practice, is anyone in inside dialogue speaks about his or her own experience, or what it's arising in the mind, what is not to do is to give good advice to others, to make an explanation or interpretation of the experience that we hear from others. So it's really together, but each one contemplating what's arising in his own mind, not making comments.
But then there is a real experience in the moment of mutuality. This is a big potential. What is mutuality? Which is not good communication. Sometimes the field of awareness is shared. There is one field. And so sometimes you can experience that there's not only a me and a you, but there is a field that encompasses both and the space in between. I don't want to say us because there's no sentimentality, let's say. It's really stepping into a different state of consciousness, where the I that binds the self becomes less active, less powerful in its being so fixed. So I would say that we can. So, but we want to invite everybody to have just a little taste of something, and we can propose you a contemplation and one guideline. So in a short time we will put randomly our participants into breakout rooms, sorry. But first we give you instructions.
I also pose.
So we will practice in dyads, 2 people. We will have turno di parola, a speaking turn. First speaker, second speaker. So this will be the first thing you will have to do while in the breaking room. You select who is the first to speak. And we will, in this case, for this experiment, we will be strictly doing, when someone's turn is to speak, the other is the listener, will not speak, will not interact, will devote himself or herself to full listening, connected to the body in a meditative stance. And also who speaks will be in a meditative stance, embodied, connected with the body, and with an intention of cultivating mindfulness. In the complexity of using voices, concepts, speaking, thought. So, but this is a, let's say, transformational aspect of this practice. So the components will be 2 people speaking at a turn, with speaking turns, something to contemplate on, which will be a universal theme or an in the moment theme. And in the meantime, what will help us to speak coming out of our habits of mental habits, speaking habits, also hunger habits, you know, the hungers, the desires, the needs, the projections. When we speak to somebody else, sometimes we are agitated by the body-mind, by the heart, or we are detached, we are not really there. And so we have a diminished experience. So how do we give a meditative attitude to what we will be speaking about? We will practice this first meditative instruction or guideline, which is an explicit invitation of mindfulness in the dialogue. It's a way of interacting when momentum is built up, when reactivity is there, when awkwardness is there, which veils the presence. So, and we have a word for this meditative instruction. Let's say the first one we usually introduce, which is pause. And pause is just a word for a whole attitude. And pause is just a word, this stopping, to explicitly invite mindfulness. And it is intentional. It will not come. We have to practice it. And it's a way to embed the practice in mindfulness. Pause is mindfulness, is recollecting awareness, here and now. We can choose to be mindful. And then maybe this inviting mindfulness allows us to really open to the relational, to having someone in front of us. But so you can say it's a temporary stop. We are speaking, we are thinking, and we are caught into projecting, reacting, stories, distractions, or an old repertoire of things we have said 20,000 times. And we need to shift to immediate experience. We need to embody this question, which is, what's like it? What was it like now? What is this that I'm experiencing? And so, what do? We stop, which means we might stop speaking in the middle of a sentence because something tells us that we are not settled, that we are repeating something tired, that there is awkwardness in the body, that we are not present. And so we stop. And what do? We go to the body. We go immediately to the breath, if it's available, or the sensations in the soles of the feet. And this is our way of stopping. It's a real interruption. We attend to the breath. We notice the contacts with the seat or with the feet. We become aware of the position of the body. And this is a sort of awakening, a little awakening. And from this settling of the mind in the moment, we go back to speaking. And we give voice to what comes, to what emerges, and to what we decide to do. So we stop the grasping, the reactive mind, the habitual mind. We stop when our attention is hijacked in something that is not there. And it's very simple. We only have to remember to do it. Stop, which out of politeness, we can stop speaking. We go to the body and then we start again, if it's our turn still. And we do the same while speaking, while listening. We are connected to the body. We realize that the words that maybe we are rehearsing for what we will say next. So we are not there. Stop. we go to the breath. And we open again. We listen again. Or we are reacting mentally to what is said. We are judging, we are correcting, we are comparing, or we are distracted. We are not listening, we are thinking to something else. We realize, stop, pause, body, now, and start again. And this is really inviting actively mindfulness, awareness in the present moment. We can even offer ourselves this word, pause, internally, while speaking of listening, if it helps. In time, we really embody it. It happens.
And so now we have a first round of breakout, but before we go into the breakout, what are we going to give words to? What are we going to talk about? Say this is an exercise especially to start realizing how is it to do pause, to practice pause. And the contemplation is one of so-called in the moment, because we are invited to contemplate the modification in the bodily sensation moment by moment. So very simple. But the point is, while we are paying attention to the modification that are arising in the body, I mean, those who are coming in the foreground, not every possible, but moment by moment, is there a certain sensation that is becoming preeminent? I don't know.
Give an example.
Yes, some realizing there is some pain in the left shoulder, or in something is itching in some place on my skin, or something more internal, a muscle that I realize is relaxing. So anything that is coming in the foreground from the ongoing and continuous modification of the sensation, the continuous arising and falling of modification in the body. So on the one side, it seems very simple. On the other side, and this is where pause can help us, we are asked, if we are the one who is speaking, to give words to this modification. That means a few words that are able to communicate to the other what's happening in the body. For example, some pain on the left shoulder. Okay. But only, and here pause becomes essential, give words only to sensation and modification that are happening in that moment. So if I'm realizing that I'm giving words, I'm speaking about something that it's already not anymore there, I stop. So
or commenting,
because it's very easy. So here the subtlety of the practice in this case is to remain attuned with attention and with the words I'm uttering to what's happening in the body. And it's very easy, because it's out of mind habits, to find ourselves speaking of something that has already happened, even a few seconds before, or starting to make stories and generalization about the fact that this part of my body usually is painful because this and that. As soon we realize that we are in some stories, or we are not speaking of something actually happening in that moment, pause. We stop and we attune again and give words with what is becoming preeminent moment by moment.
And there might be resistance because we have no juicy contents to speak about. It's just sensations in the body.
In this case.
And no contents. So it's really a training. We have to go back there, go back there. And that means we are speaking from the moment, from the foundation of the body.
Started to introduce, say, the attitude and the way to direct attention, which is invited by the word pause, with the experience of modification in the body in the moment. someone asked which is the universal aspect in this, but the fact that any one of us experience any moment in our own lives, that the sensation in the body are continuously changing. So body, which is parent validity as an experience, is of continuous changes sensation. But then let's bring
Fabio, the sound is changing. This is better.
I think also if you mute the other participants, maybe it helps.
So let's do one more step.
You are in mute.
Now let's do another step in the knowledge of pose as a meditative instruction. Because the next contemplation will be not only about something that's happening in the moment, but will bring in also other layers of our experience. And so a condition you will see in which is very easy to start telling stories in the sense of telling ideas, even very intimate narrative about our experience, but that has already been said several times. So pause invites us, when we realize that what we are saying is not completely fresh for us, is not something that it's arising by, say, the comprehension in the moment, or by that it feels real as best as you can in the moment. Pause is an invitation to stop, come to the body, and in a way waiting for something that feels, maybe even in terms of gut feeling, but feels authentic. And we choose to say, we are not obliged to say everything. And to this, we are invited to give words. But pause here is really the freedom to stop, even in the middle of something we are saying, if it doesn't feel completely, I would say, authentic. Stop, connect to the body, and waiting for something more fresh and more persuasive, I would say, to be put in words for the other. And so this is another layer of pause. Again, we will go back in diets, in the breaking rooms, speaking turns, so one speaker, one listening, and then vice versa. In this case, the time of each speaking turn will be 7 minutes. So 7 minutes, then we go to the second speaker.
So when will we practice pause? Before speaking, while we are speaking, after we spoke, and also while listening. And pause means paying attention, and paying attention to immediate experience. So the contemplation before was contemplating directly change as it happens, second by second, in the simple form of the flux of physical sensations in the body. But it was also obliging us to pay attention, and to go back to pay attention. It's and one of the foundations of mindfulness is the body. But now we deepen a little bit the practice of pause. With an evolution of the contemplation on change, and we will need, as Fabio said, to go to the archive of the mind, maybe, to think about it. So maybe it's more challenging, because there will be the contents. There might be tension inherent to what we might say or think. Pause will be doubly needed. So we contemplate the modifications of our body in time, and which means how our body is changing, has changed. Could be the theme of growing older, realizing that our body changes and maybe it's not in the direction we would like, but we spy anxiously in the mirror or these modifications. And it could be changes because something happens to the body, something that maybe we decide, something that happens externally, and we can call it with the big name of aging. But even before, we were contemplating aging, because each of us before, just speaking of, I feel this, I feel that, we were looking at aging in there as it happens. It happens a second without us even realizing that it's happening. But then when the big change is visible, then we are shocked, or we are sad, or we are depressed by it, or maybe not. So everybody's invited to speak their truth of this moment about this change happening in time through the body. The body is the first beacon of change. But it will be important to speak from a don't know mind. So not all the cliche about ourselves, about the body, about aging, but really, what is it true? What is it that I'm going to say? So speaking from a don't know mind, being patient, being committed to continuously say something that we feel we can say. And when it comes out, we wouldn't want to take it. So pause and the modifications in the body over time, you can call it aging.
So now we're going to open space from questions but before we go to that, what was the universal aspect in what we were contemplating? But we can simply call it impermanence. But you know, impermanence immediately sounds as something abstract or very Buddhist. But noticing the change moment to moment in our body, or contemplating the change over time in our body, that's a way to connect directly in our own experience, in contemplating our own experience, to the universal theme of impermanence. Because if we just would start contemplating or discussing about impermanence as an abstraction or an idea or a philosophical principle, can be nice, but maybe is less directly felt as something that it's really concerning each of us in any moment of our life. And of course, now we are speaking of impermanence experience in our body. Then impermanence is everywhere. So this to frame what we have done with pause and the two contemplation, with small contemplations.
But also we started with the extreme simplicity of paying attention in the moment. Mindfulness starts from paying attention. And that was the first contemplation, one of the aspects. And seeing that it's easy to do it when we have the intention to do it, but we forget. We continuously forget paying attention to what is the experience in the moment. This is why we need pause as an instruction, explicit, to call back mindfulness.
Yes, can I share I think it's so exactly like you say, Antonella, that it's really difficult to stay in the immediate experience. So the tendency, for example, in this last breakout room, and I'm very grateful for the feedback I also got at the end, is precisely for me, in my experience, to get to fall back in my pattern of speed, talking faster and disconnecting to the immediate experience, and kind of creating like a story, or it's not a story, it's what I what I believe about the aging, which was the topic, right? But not so much the immediate experience and paying attention to the body while I'm talking about it. So it was really difficult and very interesting.
It is, but at the same time, we can noticing how is when the mind goes at that, say, for example, abstract level, or stories or narrative we live in, and so can be noticed in the moment, also as something interesting for the practice. Like when we are in the individual meditation, we get, I don't know, we are on the breathing, we get distracted, we notice the thoughts or the images that have distracted us, and we come back. We are seeing something it's happening in the moment in the mind. And here, in this respect, is the same, but it's difficult.
The fact is that we don't want to stop the train of thought, the speaking quickly, because we think we might lose something. When you practice mindfulness in the form of this stop, of the pause, of going back to that body, to the felt sense of experience, after that, what is true? What can be said? And sometimes this allows to connect to a more intuitive experience, something that is true now, and sometimes it even surprises us, because below or behind the fabrication of stories or narratives or the things we already think we know, maybe there is a new, fresh truth about ourselves that needs to be called out for, and it will change also that. So thank you, Tatian. And is there somebody else that would like to share some experience or doubt or question?
Daniela, you had a question about practicing. Would you like to offer it now?
Do you mean me, Katarina? You are not, we can't hear you.
Yes, I only unmuted myself to talk to you. So yes, I mean you, because you had put a question in the chat where you could be practicing, training to practice more.
No,
so maybe you want to ask that here.
Maybe it was me, sorry.
I think it was somebody else. I saw the question, but it was not me. Ah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It was me, yeah, it was me. Yeah, because I'm practicing mindfulness meditation, and I'm also a professional coach, and I've had some experiences with mixing the two, and I think this practice can be very enriching for my professional, approach with trying to create a space of more profundity within the coaching. So I would be interested in knowing, how one gets trained in this, how we can practice this. Are there groups or how it works?
Yes, when we offer some information about this, there are two say, caveat, two things to consider. First, that this is a Dharma practice, so it's really rooted and aimed as inside meditation to a liberative aim, and this is taken very seriously. So this practice, in this aspect, is a contemplative practice, full-blown. And the second, that therefore the benefit in any professional realm comes as a side effect, so to say. One is become curious or interested in the practice and start practicing. And then the side effect can be brought, so to say, of enhanced sensitivity or enhanced capacity to bring awareness into the relational contact, comes as side effects into all our relationship, included the relational, because in this respect would be a bit, in a way, the risk of a sort of immediate application, so to say, or an instrumental, an application that from the beginning has some instrumental aim, can be to diminish the power of the practice. So it's important to keep in mind to enjoy for ourselves the full power of this practice as a contemplative practice, and then the side effect will come, so to say.
Yeah, also the meditative instructions are more. We just gave a little taste of introductory of one of them, the first one. And to practice inside dialogue, you go to retreats, you go to day-longs, as with another meditation practice. The path is like that. You cultivate together with others in retreats. It's 8:30.
Yes.
If I may say just one thing, my experience that normally when I listen actively, I'm very much focused on the person who is talking, and all my attention is there. And this time I was trying to have a wider attention and to be also myself. I was attentive both listening and listening to myself. And somehow it was much deeper experience in listening to this other person in this way, if I was only focused on the person. So it was more focused on the person, even if it was focused on me. It was like to focus on, it's difficult to explain, but it was deeper.
It's very clear, because this is exactly one of the possibility one discovered, that sati can encompass our internal experience and external experience. So very clear, at least for us, what you are describing. It's possible.
And let's say that a lot more is going on that we could open to in the moment, in the relation, than just listening or just being concentrated on ourselves or on what we think is the other.
So it was very powerful, really.
Yeah, cover a lot of things. Thank you. Kata, I can't say your name.
Katarzyna.
Well, thank you, Antonella and Fabio. We can only give a brief taste of this and touch on interest and maybe see what emerges for our colleagues if they want to go further. And I can tell you that as a EAMBA, we can facilitate that. In the pause, we talked, Fabio, Antonella and I, about maybe resources that we could share and upcoming practices that they organize. So keep an eye on those pages. And if you have registered for this meeting, then you will receive a dedicated a dedicated mailing to draw your attention to that page. Otherwise, you simply have to go to the page.
Thank you,
Okay.
Katarina, for inviting us and everybody for joining.
Yes, and also for the, I mean, taking this, the curiosity and also the risk to be involved in such sometimes intense practice of attention.